Now we will move to the next presenter, who is Professor Cristina Pronello. She is a full professor at Politecnico di Torino, Inter-University Department of Regional and Urban Studies and Planning. She has been also a full professor at Université Lumière Lyon 2. She is a member of the Scientific Advisory Board of the GPI Urban Europe, and she's also vice chair of the Cost Action Vice Act on wider impacts and scenario evaluation of autonomous and connected transport. Her scientific interests are mainly focused on the travel behavior, the effects of ITS on user behaviors, the mobility surveys, transport economics, and the environmental impacts of the transport systems. And today she will give a keynote speech on value of travel time and future mobility systems. So Cristina, the floor is yours now.
Thank you. I don't know if you are seeing my presentation because I'm moving the box, but I don't see very well, but let me know.
Yes, we can see.
Okay, that's great, because I would like just to move the box of GoToMeeting because it's hampering to me to see all the presentation, but it's not important. Well, thank you so much and good morning to everyone. Thank you so much to Gadir and Tatiana for inviting me. It's a big pleasure for me to be with all of you, even though virtually. So as Tatiana introduced, I will speak about future mobility system. I mean more, it doesn't work, the advancement, yes, more, how to say, a look on the solution, potential solution of for the future transport system. So what could we do? Looking precisely more with more attention to the aspect related to cognitive aspects, attitudes, and so on. So I will give a very, very brief, given the short time, look about some question, which solution could be there in the next future. And then I will present you two case studies, one carried out in 2011 and the other one very recently in 2019, that how to say, allow to me to have some surprises because nothing is changing. I should say, attitudes continue to matter and are really very important to understand which lever to move for changing travel behavior and going to a more sustainable transport systems. And finally, a very few suggestions to policymakers what to do in the next future. So which are the potential solutions that are, how to say, on the table? Anyone is speaking a lot about what we could do, and some refrain are in our ears because we understand that a lot of people say we have to focus on the sustainable urban mobility plans and we should integrate them with several aspects as regard to the past. So for sure, electric mobility, now a lot of people are speaking about that, and also the new forms of mobility that I will show in the next slide. Where the new forms of mobility for me is not really, how to say, a good wording, because what is new is not so clear because it's quite old, as we're speaking also always about car, as we will see, but I'm stopping here about this point. Then the other point that is a big, where there is a big discussion is the free public transport. Till 3-4 years ago, a lot of debate arrived in France speaking about what could be done in big metropoles as Paris, for example, if the public transport could become free, what could be done to make, how to say, effective this change, this shift, and mainly how to tackle the big expenses that should go to the shoulders of the state and so to the shoulder of the citizens to afford a free public transport. But effectively, and this is also my view, is not said that it's a very good idea because first of all, to reduce pollution, the first important thing to do is try to improve as much as possible the public transport and the soft modes in terms of supply and safe and secure condition to move, and try to penalize the car because otherwise people, we will see in the next results, people tend to prefer car because it's flexible, because it gives so many aspects related to comfort that it's quite difficult to fight against car. So about the new forms of mobility, usually, and now also the previous presentation at the end showed the autonomous vehicles. We are working together with Gadir and Tatiana about this topic in the cost action, and they know that I'm really opposite to this form of mobility for several reasons, but it's not the place for discussing about that. In any case, as you can see in the slide, when we're speaking about new players and new mobility services, we look at cars. There are cars everywhere, and the sharing mobility that it should, as in Italy we should say shared mobility, is something that is evoked by many people. But are we sure that shared mobility is really shared? It's quite interesting to look at the meaning of sharing. And you can see that sharing implies social exchange and implies that people try to, how to say, exchange something without any payment. And usually, this was, how to say, the origin of the terms, usually among people that they know each other very well. This is not exactly what's happening in car sharing. And so when sharing is market mediated, is not sharing at all. This is quite interesting. And so the aspect that we can highlight is that consumers are paying to access, you see someone else's goods or services for a certain period. So this is implied in exchange, and if there is money exchanged by those people, we are more on the utilitarian aspect than on the social value. So this should pour some reflection in our mind about really what is sharing mobility, and if this is really a new form for the futures of mobility. So let's look what people think about that. And let's start from the first case study carried out now 9 years ago in Alessandria. That is a medium-sized city, more or less around 80–90,000 inhabitants in the Piedmont region, northwest of Italy, so close to the French border. Not close to the French border of the city, but Piedmont is close to the French border. So in these medium-sized cities, where cities in general, where public transport is not so exciting, so this means the frequency is not so exciting, the cover of the territory is not so exciting, this poses some problems for sure. So I did a study there to understand effectively what people thought about their mobility patterns, which were their attitudes towards mobility transport systems in general. And thanks to a factor analysis and a cluster analysis, I segmented the market and I found 4 profiles. These 4 profiles are quite interesting because we will see that they come back again in the recent study. And I just will comment a bit more those that are more related to time, because time is the topic of the conference. So time, travel pleasure addicts are those who show the highest willingness to change mode, so to change their behavior, and they like so much traveling. It's not important which mode they use, but they like traveling, so move. While the 2 groups in red, the time addicts and time servers, are more related to the use of time during traveling, they unfortunately, but this is what emerged, they have the highest car dependence. And let's see if I can show, sorry, it's quite, so I don't see, okay, let me know if you see the animation, because I don't see the, okay, that's great. And what is quite interesting for all those profiles is that car is cut across all the groups. So the mode is not important to distinguish the group, because car, unfortunately, is the most used mode for all of them. But we can see that, for example, for the time server, those are, and this could be very important for the decision maker, those are the most difficult people to, how to say, to move from their position. So for changing travel behavior is quite complicated for them, and probably is not sure, but if a proper communication, advertising, and sensitization about how much costs using the car, probably this could push them to at least reflect to change mode. While the green consensus are those who are using the car, but not for pleasure, for necessity. So this means the car has an important role that evidently public transport is not able to cover. This is an important message for decision makers. So definitely what I found is that the users' emotions are one of the most important variables to really understand why they make some specific choices when traveling, why they chose the mode mainly, and why they select some destination to go with a certain mode and so on. And effectively, one of the first solution I'm proposing that have been showed as important also in the second study is that it is important to work on the image of the public transport, because public transport is misperceived, is perceived as very bad, worse than effectively it is. So this is quite important. So the perception is what is the variable on which we base our decision. So work on perception is very, very important. And the trade-off, the problem mainly for those medium small cities is how to tackle the high cost to improve public transport in areas where the density is not so high. So public transport in this case is more expensive than in urban context, very densely inhabited. And even more because to reach this good service, the network effect should be important, but it's difficult to reach in these kind of territories. So definitely the question and the answer. The analysis of travel behavior is very, very important. Is what we really need to do more and more, because it allows to us to understand more the levers to move, to understand to which extent enforcement is necessary. I say that is usually necessary because people need, how to say, to be pushed a lot to change habits and behavior, because this is the most difficult thing to do, and how to use the supply to really affect the demand. And so the individual focus theories and the theories related to behavioral change are a starting point very important that I use also in the second study. So the second study, most recent, we just finished and we are preparing the papers in 2019. So it lasted 2018 and 19. Was much bigger than the previous one that we had more or less 1,000 respondents in the first survey in Alessandria. That is more or less here. Alessandria is the southeast. While the second survey, as you can see, we had 4,500 respondents in all the region, but mainly here in the metropolitan area of Torino. So you say that Piemonte is northwest of Italy. And so we stratified the sample according to all those variables, and those in bold are the variables that we use to compare and with the whole population of the Piedmont region and to understand which was the representativity of our survey. This was not the purpose, so I didn't want to have a representative sample, but study in depth a group of people. Definitely the representative in the region, in the metropolitan area of Torino was very good, not for all the region because we have not so many answers outside the metropolitan area of Torino. So the study allows to, using again factor analysis and then cluster analysis, to have to find out 5 factors on which the population was segmented, and this allowed to obtain 4 clusters, very similar to the cluster I found out in the previous study that I just showed you before. So as you can see, the important factor are mode pleasure, means how much I like the mode I'm using, that is my foot, the bike, the public transport or the car. that is different from the travel pleasure, because travel pleasure is how much I like traveling. It's not important with which mode, but I like to move, to go somewhere and so on. So I find a pleasure in moving myself. While the second factor is more related to the economical and ecological, so environmental aspect of traveling, so the green conscience, we can say. And the fourth factor is quite interesting because it's related to what can I do while traveling. So the time spent during the trip, so the activities I can do, and also there was together in this factor also the sense of and the feeling of safety and security I have in the transport system. And then the last one was more related because we had a lot of questions related to how to say the attitude towards charity, doing something for the other ones. So the openness and sociality of person that is exactly the opposite of egoism. And as you can see, the four clusters, I will do short time just focus on the two ones related to time, and I go directly to these groups, but making just a short comment about what was not important at all was very important at all. So trip purpose is not important. This is confirmed completely what I found out in the previous study. So trip purpose is not important. Absolutely doesn't affect transport choice. I know that the literature, part of the literature say that, but in this sample that was representative is not important. The previous sample is not important at all. This was my conviction, but was demonstrated with the figures and facts. The choice of a transport mode mainly depends on habit. Habit is very, very important because it creates an automatism that hamper me to really reflect what is better according to several criteria, we can say, or also my values. Lack of information, misperception of alternatives is another important thing. This is related also to the information I spoke before and the advertising, if you want, because when I don't know how public transport really is performing or the presence of bike piles and so on, probably I tend to follow what I'm usually doing. And so this is related to habit for sure. And also the awareness about impacts of my mobility patterns is very important. Usually some groups, time servers, for example, are not aware at all. So they don't care about what could happen if you are using a car, absolutely. And this, is how to say, very important because you cannot do something good enough for the environment if you are not aware about that, because you don't know at all. So we should reflect about that. It's very important. And something that is considered very important usually, that is the cost and the income is not important at all, and confirm again what find out in the previous study. So let's see a bit more how time servers are and how my malcontent time addicts are. Time servers don't like at all, as you can see in the picture, they don't like at all traveling. Really, they are bored when they have to move. They just travel because they need. So it's mandatory for them because I have to do something in a certain location. And quite interesting, because this is opposite to another group, they have a very, very low social rule compliance. So they don't tend to offer the seat in the public transport, for example, to elderly people. They don't do any kind of charity and so on. So they're very, very low level on those variables. They don't like at all sport, and they don't do sport at all. They are not lazy, but they are really not sportmen and women. Low level of the education is another very important variable that in the previous study was really one of the most important features distinguishing the clusters. So when the level of education is low, you are less aware about the effects of your mobility. You are not thinking about a lot of aspects related to your mobility. You don't care absolutely about what's happened around you. So the level of education is key, and is also related to the awareness of your own behavior. The worry about personal security is another important factor that came out. that is also affecting, if you want, the use of public transport, but also carpooling and all the other transport mode that implies a sharing of the space with people that you don't know. And this is also relative if you think about autonomous vehicles, is the picture we saw in the previous presentation. And there is no preference about transport, so they choose according what is really useful for them in that moment. We can say they are completely opportunist. While the other group, the malcontent time addicts, they are completely, we can say, at the opposite side. So they are very attentive to social problem. They respect the law. They are very, very precise in that. And as you can see here, they are, unfortunately, this is a problem, strongly dissatisfied about the mode, the transport they are using. And they ask for, and is not strange that an important percentage of those people use mainly public transport. So they don't like, they find that is not flexible, not reliable, that is very slow. So all those factors for them are very important and hampering, if you want, a certain behavior. So this means that I'm using public transport, but pay attention because I could move to another transport mode. So they really perceive the public transport as low, very low, low speed, and they have no problem at all with the price. So it's not a problem, the cost. So probably they are willing to spend more if the public transport could be faster and more efficient. This is another quite interesting thing, because this is a sort of alert. They don't perceive the free time on board. They have, but they are so dissatisfied with service, they are not perceiving the value of having time because you have not to drive on board. And this is really correlated to the bad perception they have about the mode they are using. And they don't see at all, unfortunately, again, the negative aspect related to using the car. So they see the car effectively as something more reliable, more flexible, more comfortable, instead of what they are using, but they don't see absolutely the bad side of the medal, we can say, and of the coin. They have a very high attitude toward technology, like car addicts. Car addicts are really the worst, we can say, group according to car use. And so which could be the measures for those two groups? For the last one I spoke about, the malcontent time addicts, the measure could be improvement of contacts between customer and transport operators. Means that transport operators should become really mobility providers instead that classical and traditional transport operators. Means that they have to open the doors and say, okay, guys, ladies, look at what we do our services. So create a sort of a contact with their customers. This could be very useful for them because could overcome the misperception and bad perception they have about the service, and also remind and recall which are the negative aspects of traveling by car, because they are sensitive to that, but they are not seeing those aspects. For the time servers, education is very important. So the education on explaining which are the impacts of on mobility, of the choices they are doing when traveling, and increase. So this means that create a sort of education to mobility starting from the schools, because this allows to having them a low educational level, allow to them to, how to say, learn more and understand more effectively what does it mean traveling and which are the impacts of that. And the security on board is also very important. This is an aspect that has to be taken care by the transport operator, because they don't like and don't want to use public transport because they are feeling insecure. So this is important to say, okay, but there is a CCTV, more control and so on. This could be an action to be made by the transport operators. Going to the end, so what decision makers should pay attention to? For sure, the improvement of public transport is asked by all the groups. So all the groups, all the profile I show you think the same. So public transport is not good enough for them. For the car addicts that are really car addicts, exactly the label that express what they are, and for the time servers, they ask for a more attractive public transport. They want more comfort, and for example, putting the Wi-Fi is something that was asked from them. Wi-Fi on board to allow, for example, to chat, to telephone, or to go to internet without old cost could be an important feature that they ask for, and as also cleanness and security. So these are the things on which to focus. For the malcontent time addicts and eco-friendly travel pleasure that are the most sustainable in terms of travel mode they use, because they use, we can say more, little bit more than the others soft modes, they would like to have faster services and more reliable services, and for the public transport, more frequent services. And what could happen if those measures are not taken? There is a big danger, because no improvements, we keep the things as they are, car addicts will never leave their car. So they will continue to use the car massively. Time servers probably could shift toward other solutions according to what is more useful for them. They are opportunism per excellence. And malcontent time addicts those are using more public transport could change and shift and divert towards private vehicles, the cars, when what they suffer in terms of dissatisfaction is more important than the environmental impacts that they are aware of. So which are if you want, the threats and risks? And I finish with this comment. I see two big risks. Speaking about autonomous vehicles, because there was a section in the questionnaire about autonomous vehicles, those vehicles are perceived as more sustainable, technological advanced. So there is also, if you want, a part of misperception. Also from the malcontent time addicts that are the more public transport users. And the autonomous vehicle ensure free time. We have seen free time on board, in addition to all the advantages that are proper of a car. So this could generate a risk that is possible shift from public transport to autonomous vehicles in the next future. And this is not good, absolutely. For the carpooling, eco-friendly travel pleasure addicts are the most attracted to the carpooling, but these could generate, as they are the most inclined to use soft modes, a shift from the soft modes that are the cleanest one to private vehicles, even though carpooling. So it's evident that the role of transport policies is crucial, and work more on the supply to influence the demand is absolutely mandatory. So I'm concluding with this slogan, if you want, because I think that decision makers are not aware enough about the power they have, and that thanks to their policies and a strong, how to say, intervention of the supply and some restriction of the use of private car, they will never obtain any kind of sustainability in our mobility. Is a sad message, but this is something very important to be known. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Cristina, for a very comprehensive presentation.